Hi, this is Brad, and welcome to another video in the bitB video training series. Today we're going to talk about credentials. So credentials are used to connect to the devices so that you can discover network devices, and you can also pull the network devices after they're discovered. So to see credentials, you can actually go to Tools, Credentials, and you'll see a credential pop up. There's different types of credentials. So if you click on Add, you can see the different types. There's default, host IP, host name, group name, and network address. So let me give you a quick idea of what each of these are. If I put in a default credential, that means use this credential for any IP address that is in the auto discovery table. And the IP address is in the auto discovery table because one of the devices already discovered, or an IP that you add for a seed device, or an IP that you add for the add device, that gets put into the auto discovery table. So in there it's saying, okay, if it's default, try this one for all devices. Okay. The next one is host IP. So host IP will only be used, that credential will only be used for an IP matching the host IP. Host name, bitB actually does a reverse lookup. So if your IP addresses for your network devices are in the DNS server, bitB will actually do a reverse lookup, and it will look for that text that you put in there and the host name. And it doesn't have to be an exact match. It's a pattern match. So some customers or some users will actually put in maybe FW in all their firewall names. So you could actually look for FW or SW for switch. Okay. Group name's the same thing, and they're actually basically the same, but it helps you organize. So group name and host name, they're the same thing, but you can put a group name in there saying, okay, maybe FW I put in there because that's a group name. And host name, I put in something specific if I want to. All right. Network address can actually be a subnet, or will be a subnet. So this is where you're actually putting in the subnet and the mask, and you can actually, you'll put the IP address in here, and you could do an IP prefix or a decimal, and it says, okay, for that user ID and password, any IP address that is within that subnet will use that user ID and password. So you also have to look at the credential list as a way of scoping. So when I say scoping, it's the way that bitB decides what credentials to use for what IP addresses that will be discovered. And once an IP is discovered and added to bitB and it becomes a device, then bitB uses that credential, whatever was used during discovery. And you'll also notice when you go to device and you go to manage IPs, you have an option in here to say, use a credential list or don't use a credential list. When you don't use a credential list, you type it in manually here. This does not get added to credential list. So this would only be used for that one IP address that you put in there. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, and that's for seed device. And then for device IPs, it's the same thing. But if you want that credential, to use a credential from the credential list, then you just want to click on use credential list. Okay, so I hope this helped you understand credentials more. Thanks for joining us for this video, and definitely come back and see the other videos that are in the bitB video training series. Thank you and have a great day.